better late than never. In the chat, I said, gonna get ahead of this one. Griff is running 20 minutes late. Please espresso accordingly. And we're now an hour and 10 minutes late.
We did our job.
Yep. Well, probably means that everyone who's watching is not at work. What time is it in the West Coast?
5:45. 5:45 p.m.
Yeah, thanks.
So that's
saying
military time. What is that? 17:45.
Oh, are you big into the military time?
Well, you guys use that stuff, right?
Yeah, but we don't call it military time necessarily.
What do you guys call it? I forget. What is that?
Just 24-hour clock.
24-hour clock. Yeah, that makes sense.
No, just time.
Time. What is time? Is it real? Is time even real?
It doesn't have to be real. Like, it's what you make of it.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. See, but I was thinking more as like a unit of measurement. Like, what are we measuring? It's just something we all agree to. It's real if we all agree.
Did we agree to it? Like, I didn't agree to that.
It's kind of it was one of those things that we didn't consciously submit to.
But we're all complicit.
Sure. And then that's what makes each new generation, submit to it.
Submit.
Yeah, like who of us consented to, like, yeah, that's 20, okay, yeah, it's a second, 60 seconds to a minute, 60 minutes to an hour, 24 hours in a day. Like who like no one's like, okay, fine, we were just told.
Well,
that's how we measure time around here.
There's these people called British people who in their time it's 1:47 a.m. So they're not using the same time as you.
You guys are using the same unit of measurement. You're just in a different part of the world.
Sure. Do you think there are people who are like, no, we're not 60 seconders, we're 90 seconders?
So I wonder, because we can measure time the way that we do, and we always know what time it is.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that's made our brains perceive the concept of time differently. Otherwise, if we had not measured time the way that we do, like hunter-gatherer societies, would they have thought about time the way that they think about it, like we do? Because we're always thinking about the concept of time, like, oh, X amount of minutes or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Whereas,
ultimately, the sun is the most important thing here, isn't it?
Right, but we've totally subverted the sun with
electricity
and candles. So, like, we're not actually like, oh, it's
blue lights, blue screens.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I have. Do you use blue light blockers on your devices and stuff?
I have a night mode.
Yeah, night mode. Night mode.
Does it work though? Are you sure we can trust Apple with this? Big tech. What if it's like even worse for you?
That's doubtful.
Okay.
That's doubtful.
Something to consider.
Do we have the time to consider that?
Probably not. But where are you going with this?
I don't know. I thought we'd segue into something more like philosophical or existential with that whole concept of space time.
Continuum.
But maybe for another day. By the way, you're wearing a Sonics hat. That reminded me of something, because I forgot that I did it until something reminded me of it a couple days ago. But when I was like in late elementary school, I got invited to, somehow my dad got access to it, like a Sonics practice.
Wow.
And I don't remember a lot, but I was like 3 or 4 rows back, and I got to watch like the Sonics practice. It was really cool.
What were they doing? Just shooting around?
They were going through their like their scheme and stuff and like drills. And I
Wow.
remember Nate McMillan standing there like saying stuff to people. I remember Richard Lewis and Ray Allen. I remember Richard Lewis walking around, but then the main things I remember were like during one period, like they were doing like live scrimmage, but during one period, Brent Berry, that their shooting guard at the time, made every pass behind the back like it was like he was like doing a running bit, and he was making absurd passes, like insane passes, like passes that are hard to do even like done regularly.
Do you think
Like
that's because he had an additional audience, or do you think, making it harder on himself? You got to practice these things.
yeah, maybe he was just screwing around, but and then Ray Allen like never missed, like ever, like straight up, just like didn't matter what shot he just made everything. And like it's crazy how these guys are when they're in relaxed, they're just
Right.
absolutely automatic, like
Yeah.
just so automatic. Like in a live game, it's like different, of course, still, but like
Yeah.
the percent of like some of the 3-point shooters in a live game when they're open, like wide open, like their percent skyrockets, you know. So like these guys are just like machines. Like
Yeah.
because they were practicing like real defense, everything, and Ray Allen just didn't miss ever,
You can't
and
you
it was
can't
normal. Like
simulate the
no,
adrenaline.
right,
Yeah.
right, and like no one, like none of the players were phased by it. They're like, just Ray just makes that, yeah, every time he makes that, like in a live scrimmage. It was crazy, but like someone like Brent Berry was like just doing casual like cross court passes, like in the half court, but it was just absurd. Like and no one could defend it. It was crazy. Um, yeah, that was
Speaking
cool.
of basketball, do you think we've lost viewers to the celebrity All-Star game that's going on right now?
I don't know. I hope not.
I
I hope
saw
not.
DK Metcalf dunked.
Is he playing in it?
Yes.
Oh, that's crazy.
But he has this habit of landing on one leg after elevating that is very concerning.
Concerning. Yeah. Yikes.
And then 21 Savage hit a 3-pointer.
Oh, wow. Good
Yeah.
for him.
The UK's finest.
Right.
We claim him.
Does he claim you, though?
No, I don't think so. And that is probably more important.
Hmm.
Yes. Should we do the podcast?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Thanks everyone for joining. Like the video, comment. Kyle T says BRB. You better be back, Kyle. Right. Welcome to the Seattle Overload podcast, where it is our offense review. The Seahawks played offense in 2022, as happened. Geno Smith won Comeback Player of the Year. However, the offense did dwindle as the season went on. We're going to explore the data as to why that happened and also just talk around the topics. Griff, how disappointed were you after the great start? How surprised were you after the great start? Is this sustainable? These are all things we'll answer, but just an overview.
Yeah, because it became the new normal was when Geno, when they were on fire, scoring points. The first really 13 weeks of the season with some hiccups here and there, and then when the last 5 weeks occurred, yeah, it was disappointing. It was like, oh no, what happened? Was it all of it? Was all of it real? Was all of it fake? I mean, I never thought it was. I thought it was real. I thought the rest was just circumstantial, contextual, and we'll unpack all that. And then, but what reassured me, because I would have held that opinion no matter what happened in that wild card game, but it was reassuring to kind of end on a high note from Geno, where he kind of looked like the Geno of the first 13 games of the season. Ripping passes, really accurate. He was a good decision maker, all that stuff. For the most part, managed the pocket well. But yeah, I was gonna say something that I totally forgot what it was.
But you believe, basically you believe it was real, even though it's disappointing how it ended, and the sort of high note game, even with the fumble in the wild card round, that
Yeah,
that high note game was sort of an encouragement. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, it was good to end that way, but there was another point I was going to make, which I totally spaced on.
The
But
future,
yes,
perhaps.
perhaps the future. We can always talk about the future. Yeah, it's just good to know that. Like, I think that this is they have their quarterback, they have the structure of their offense. Like this whole year to me was kind of like a proof of concept kind of season, and the rest was just like the offensive line play. Like forget about quarterback play, just the offensive line. Like no offense was going to be good for the full course of the season with what the offensive line like crumbled into pretty much. Like because it did crumble, but it wasn't permanent. It was more just like rookies reaching their limit. Um, and then, injuries on the interior and stuff like just all, and then the Blythe's weaknesses kind of being highlighted more as things crumbled around him as well. Like that was kind of like a negative feedback loop there. It's like, okay, that's the limit of the offense. With the exception of the best improvisers in the world at quarterback, they weren't going to be able to survive that. But part of it is trying to remember that, like, there were no expectations this year. So the fact that they had came away having identified their future / immediate future quarterback, and then they've got real pieces on offense. Like I see more capacity for growth than regression. So they just have so many things going for them. Yeah, so that's how I view all of it. But what about you? What are your general impressions from the season offensively?
Yeah, they match yours, and obviously we're going to dive deeper into this. That is what this podcast is. But in the main, there was cases of Gino pressing a bit too much and trying to make too much happen on plays which weren't there. But his process was largely the same. Like it wasn't like suddenly wasn't trying, or seeing things correctly, or trying throws which weren't there, or taking bad sacks, or running himself into pressure, or not playing within the structure of the offense. Like he tried to play the same brand of quarterback that he played throughout the season, albeit with some moments of overpressing. The problems were, he wasn't helped by his supporting cast in various areas. But yeah, so a broad statistical overview which you've put together. So you've put season-long stats. Seattle finished 13th in EPA per play, 16th in success rate, 11th in EPA per dropback, 5th in dropback success rate, 19th in EPA per rush, and 32nd in rush success rate. Wow, that is a remarkable number. I didn't realize it was that bad.
The
Okay,
success rate, yeah.
yeah. So first of all, why is the rush success rate so bad? What does that mean?
I mean that just kind of tells you right off the bat that their down to down ability to run the ball is just shitty. Like
That's
the blocking
terrifying.
it's bad. Like a combination of the blocking wasn't there, and Walker was not a great in between the tackles runner, not because of like a lack of aggression or a lack of a ability to be physical and stuff, but it was essentially decision making. So something he got better at as the year went on, and like you can tell he's going to be really good in that department because everything about his skill set and traits lend itself toward being really good at that. Like it's really hard to be better than Chris Carson was, like gun inside zone where the decision making has to occur so quickly because that wash is coming so fast. You don't have time to set up your back, your cut back or anything. You kind of have to get upfield immediately and feel out the tiny creases, and be ready for contact and get the most out of it as you can. Like that's something like Walker was trying to dance too much, essentially.
Yeah,
Um,
Carson was so good at squaring up and just going.
right. So like that's something he'll need to get better at, but he did get better at it. But then on top of that, there wasn't a lot of interior push, which is too bad considering how good they were at that to end 2021, and then how promising they looked in preseason, and then just none of it translated.
Yeah. So we'll talk a bit more about the offensive line, but in terms of statistics, you Griff you've separated us Seattle's numbers from weeks 1 to 13 and then weeks 14 to 18. Now, I presume you've done that because weeks 1 to 13 is pretty good, other than the rushing numbers, and then weeks 14 to 18 is really bad. Is there another reason for that, or?
Yeah, that's just when general play deteriorated. And then also, that's when the injuries started to stack up as well.
Right. And if you remember, Seattle, the week 14 game was the Carolina loss at home. And so let's break that down. So weeks 1 to 13, Seattle was 6th in EPA per play, 5th in success rate, 6th in EPA per dropback, 1st in success rate, 17th in EPA per rush, 30th in rush success rate. Then weeks 14 to 18, they were 25th in EPA per play, 25th in success rate, 26th in EPA per dropback, 19th in success rate, 17th in EPA per rush, and 28th in rush success rate. So obviously a clear decline. So we've addressed the rushing stuff, and obviously first injury to talk about is that Rashad Penny, he did get injured in week 5, then got IR'd. I think the run game looked up and down with Penny still, which so they did struggle to get pushed. We were talking about cohesion in the early part of the season, but that cohesion never really was found up front.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the offensive line. So in terms of one metric that exists for run blocking is ESPN's team run block win rate. According to ESPN, Seattle only placed 24th in the league in that at 71%. The best was 77% in the Baltimore Ravens. So that's quite a close number together. But none of Seattle's players placed in the individual top 10s other than Damian Lewis, who was 68% in run block win rate, which was 4th best in the NFL. Landon Dickerson of the Eagles won that with an 80% run block win rate. So, and Lewis was the one guy who you in particular, Griff, singled out as being impressive in run blocking displacement. But the rest was a lot of trying to get movement, not really doing it. Blythe is not the strongest center. He's by no means the weakest. Like, he's not a complete aberration in that area. But then when you combine that with the fact that another injury situation, Gabe Jackson isn't able to play most of the games. You have the fact that Jackson played 100% of the snaps in the first 5 weeks of the season and also in week 18. But from week 6 to 17, he played less than 70% of the snaps. And that was 60% or less of the snaps in 9 of those 10 weeks. So he wasn't playing often. And Phil Haynes came in during those moments that Jackson had to rest. And he's obviously his 2019 4th-round pick. He's turns 28 years old in October. He's kind of a backup level player. And, he had his ups and downs. And then on top of that as well, and we'll talk about this in pass protection, Abraham Lucas, Charles Cross, they're just going through rookie growing pains. Like, Cross was fine for what he was asked to do. I'd probably say Lucas started well and kind of, as the season progressed, regressed in his run blocking.
Yeah.
Got a bit banged up as well, missed week 17. And Stone Forsyth came in. I think Lucas had an elbow injury. So yeah, the offensive line, I think, a combination of maybe a slight talent issue, but also injuries and
inexperience and everything
in the run blocking department. Yeah,
I feel like Lucas has the play strength and he has the meanness to him to be good at run blocking. Like, he had some like highlight level run blocks this year, right? But obviously the consistency wasn't there. The floor wasn't there. I feel like it's just kind of, he needs more time in the scheme. And then it's just a rookie needs to go from year 1 to year 2,
Right. Like, his big thing, I think, is how do you block like a stud defensive end out who's playing wide on you?
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the main thing.
Yeah. Like, I think he has the flexibility to get low, to get under guys. Cause obviously when you're that tall, that's a natural disadvantage when you're trying to run block. But like, when leverage isn't a problem, when he's like comboing on the backside, like a 3 technique or even a 4-eye, he'll send a guy flying every once in a while. So it just goes to show that once he kind of cleans up the stuff that he needs to clean up, like he'll be able to dig out like 4 techniques and stuff like that, and reliably stay leveraged on 5 techniques, on zone away, things like that. Because obviously, like the backside of zone is a lot more important for the tackle than the front side of zone, especially how they block it. Front side of zone is still important, obviously, but you're trying to get like that wash, so the cutback is as vertical as possible for the running back. So yeah, like that will come in time. That said, to kind of circle back to Walker, some of Walker's cutbacks this year, the way how aggressively bent his angles are insane. Like his ability to cut some of those back and still get like, maintain his speed are just incredible.
Yeah.
Some crazy runs.
And really, in the rushing game, I think Pete Carroll was very aware of that being a problem for them, and we'll focus a lot on Geno Smith, but the fact that they started trying to really get the run game going because they weren't running it to the level that they wanted to, like frequency wise, but that all stems from being able to do it effectively enough to justify, doing it a lot. Like, and it's kind of a chicken or the egg before the egg thing, like that kind of dilemma of are you how much do you have to run to actually get good at it? Like, what point does it become diminishing returns because it's so inefficient? But in that Kansas City game, they really did start going for it, and the 49ers game as well. And Walker did kind of solve some of his issues, but still raw. So the secondary of him is an exciting thing, and obviously, if Penny returns, that is up in the air. I think Seattle probably likes what he brings when he's healthy. It's just, can he stay healthy? That's a question mark.
Right. I can't imagine he'll have a market,
no,
unfortunate for him. But
very unfortunate, yeah. So, kind of encompassing the run game, I hadn't realized the success rate was that bad, but so that's interesting. Now, encompassing this is third down numbers. Now, Pete Carroll always speaks about third down numbers as in you want to be kind of over the 50% mark. Now, in the first 12 games of the season, so weeks 1 to 13, in 6 of 12 games, Seattle was 50% or better in third down conversion rate. They converted, out of all the third downs they faced, they converted 43%. So they still had down games. Like week 2, they were 2 of 7. Week 5, they went 1 of 9. Week 8, they went 3 of 13. Week 11, 1 of 9. Week 12, or week 13, sorry, 3 of 9. So they still had down games, but overall 43%, and they had 6 games where they're 50% or better of the 12. Weeks 14 to 18, Seattle went from those 5 games. Seattle had 0 games where they were 50% or better in third down conversion rate. They converted, out of all the third downs they faced, only 30.2% of them. So they lost sort of 13%. And that really showed up in the run game. The run game was part of that problem. I should have looked up how the distance of third downs changed, because it felt like they were in worse, more clear pass downs and distances. So when you look at the fact that Geno as a the passing offense, the overall offense suffered, I think obviously that is then reflected in third downs. And if you don't convert third downs, then you have less opportunities. And they just stop converting third downs.
Yeah.
Now, Geno, Griff, his regression, I was trying to explore why it happened. So, teams ran slightly. I wondered if maybe it was a cover 1, cover 3 middle field closed issue, because Geno was worse against that. So in that weeks 1 to 13 stretch where the offense was doing really well, especially passing the football and just overall efficiency-wise. Gino was still just 22nd in points earned per play versus middle field closed, whereas against cover 2, cover 4, and cover 6 zone, he was 4th in points earned per play. That was very similar in the weeks 14 to 18 stretch. He was 20th in points earned per play versus cover 1 and cover 3, and 4th in points earned per play versus cover 2, cover 4, and cover 6. So, and he actually faced slightly less middle field closed coverage in that stretch. So that's not the reason for his struggle. It wasn't a play action or non-play action deal either. So why the regression? Do you put it all on the pass protection? Because that's one thing, right?
So I think the answer for like, okay, why are the numbers are what they are? Why do the numbers fall? When I say this, or when I've said it on Twitter, people think I'm making excuses for Gino. To me, it's the opposite. I feel like we got valuable information about the spectrum, or the floor and the ceiling with Gino was clearly defined this game, or this past season. So like to me, it's just information. Like I think that Gino was remarkably consistent in his process and what he could control throughout the whole year, and like the rest was just a reflection of like how, like what was the potential of the offense, of like the potential of the offense then was determined by like the play going on around him, and he was going to essentially get the most out of what was available, but then also reveal how lackluster things are around him, if things are lackluster around him at the same time. So like, yeah, so his statistical regression, it's he loses his pass catchers. Tyler Lockett isn't 100% healthy even in games he's suiting up. Like that's reflected by like they didn't play him very many snaps. Some of them, they didn't throw the ball to him a lot. Wasn't getting open. You know, they lose Marquise Goodwin, they lose Will Disley. Like those things add up. And then the blocking kind of plummets for a lot of those games.
Yeah, on the injuries, Goodwin, he missed week 9 against the Arizona Cardinals, was limited week 10 in Munich. He was playing through banged up knee injury, battled a hand and wrist injury. He then re-injured that wrist and also dislocated his shoulder in Kansas City. So missed week 17, 18, and then the wildcard game.
Yeah.
Lockett broke his finger in week 15, so missed week 16. And then Will Disley landed on IR with a foot injury, missing weeks 17, 18 in the wildcard game.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, I don't think his play intrinsically struggled. So, or rather, I don't think he became intrinsically worse. So like the first 49ers game, if that game occurred in that last third of the season or whatever, the last 5-6 weeks of the season, no one would have batted an eye, right? The only reason why that game occurred was because they played a team that they were greatly outmatched by. And he had a good game before that week, and he had a good game after that week. So really, I feel like that stretch toward the season is just purely coincidental, that all those games happen to occur like one after the other. And even then, that said, like you can watch the tape against the Jets. Like he was good against the Jets. He was good against the Chiefs. But like there's only so much that you can execute there. The games that really concern you, at least concern me, like that Panthers game, because I thought the protection played well that game, of that stretch, fairly well anyway. Enough to where if Gino was on his stuff, he would have been a lot better. But like for the most part, that game in particular, I didn't even see like bad process, like with the exception of him getting risky with that. You know, he thought he had a free play interception, like that was bad. But that was just more like the ball was dying on him. And that was a concern. Like, is his arm strength waning over the course of a season? Is it
He was
adding up
dealing
a
with
bit?
he
had a
was
shoulder.
dealing with a shoulder injury, wasn't he?
Yeah,
he was
he was.
listed on the injury report. So that as a potential explanation makes sense, given that the following weeks you didn't see the ball die as it did in that game.
Right. Agreed. And then the other game that concerned me was the Rams game, because that was, you know, things around him were good enough that the second Rams game were good enough, and he was just making like bad decisions. So like that's just a game where I'm like, okay, bad quarterback play. But then the other games in that stretch, like we said, like the Jets game, the Chiefs game, even that second 49ers game, to me, that's like, yeah, there were some bad plays cropping up, but when he like the turnover worthy throws, there's an uptick of that. And even like that Raiders game, which I don't include in the sample, like the last 5 weeks. So I thought he was good in the Raiders game. But with the influx of turnover worthy plays that occurred and stuff, most of them are happening. Those turnover worthy throws are happening like out of structure. And so he was finding himself out of structure more often. And that was purely a direct correlation with, or a direct, that directly followed from the protection around him breaking down, or the downfield picture breaking down because the receiver talent isn't there. So to me, the answer is, well, is Geno going to throw a bunch of interceptions next year? My only answer is the protection going to be bad again? Now, that's not a defense of Geno. That's me saying there's a talent ceiling there. You can take other quarterbacks. There might be some quarterbacks that will be able to still push the ball and execute with that level of protection. But there's very few of them. But at the same time, though, the flip side of that statement is, well, if Geno's only as good as his supporting cast, then what does that say about Geno? I mean, I don't agree with that statement either, though, because as you improve the supporting cast around him, there can be diminishing returns from your quarterback. I feel if you give Geno elite protection, for example, for the sake of discussion, if you give him elite protection, he'll get everything out of that elite protection, whereas the next quarterback may not. They might leave stuff on the table. I don't think Geno will. But if you give Geno protection that dips below a certain threshold of functionality, is that a word?
Yeah,
that dips below, then he may not be able to give you anything, whereas maybe the next quarterback could, but then that same quarterback may not be able to get everything out of elite protection that Geno could. So to me, there are trade-offs. It's skill set. My view is, basically like the proposition for the 2023 Seahawks offense is what is like we have what it could be, which is that first 13 weeks, right? And then we have what it also could be, like in the other direction, the last 5 or 6 weeks. As far as what we can expect for 2023, that question really is just a function of what does the offensive line play look like for the full course of the season. Then everything else will follow, because in the good games and the bad games this year, I thought Geno was rock solid, consistent, like in terms of the good and bad, like what was innate to the quarterback play, and everything else just followed from what was going on around him. So again, like if that first 49ers game happened in the latter third of the season, it would have fit right in there. If that Chiefs game occurred in the earlier part of the season, it would have been the exact same thing, even in the middle of that hot streak that he had. So I feel like everything that we saw was real. Like none of it was fake. All of it was real. And the rest is circumstantial as far as not projecting Geno, but like projecting the offense, because it's a team sport,
Yeah. So on the protection, what I found interesting was Sports Info Solutions had in the weeks 1 to 13 period, they had Geno at a 12th in pressure percentage, and then in weeks 14 to 18, that was still 12th in pressure percentage. So their pressure numbers didn't show pressure on Geno rising. However, in ESPN's team pass block win rate metric, just before week 13, Seattle was tied for 5th best in the NFL in that metric, but they finished the season 8th. So they dipped down a bit during that kind of period. And I think it is more what you were sort of saying, Griff. It's circumstantial. It reflects what was going on around Geno. It reflects
right.
certain things which these metrics aren't including, like
Right.
bad situations.
And
it does prove what Geno is, which is like a pocket navigator who, he's not gonna reliably extend plays.
And like schematically during the good stretch, he was not having his hand held schematically. He was catered to in some senses, like, hey, this is what you're good at. Go do what you're good at. But like it was the offense saying, like, we want to get stuff out of you, not we need to protect you. Right. Like it's 5-step, 7-step dropbacks. Like even during the that latter third of the season, when things are kind of getting out of control, there were drives where they had to, like, they kind of turtled up schematically a little bit. Like, it kind of reinforced itself, like in a bad way. There were some drives where it was like do or die. Like, we have to go score now. And so they would open up the offense to go, well, we hope the 5-man protection can live up. Like, they're getting into 7-step drop concepts. So like a 5-step drop from gun, and his numbers and 7-step drops over that last 5-6 weeks of the season was still top 5 in the league. And that's like pure quarterbacking. That's, now is some of it garbage time? I mean, maybe, but like his numbers in the fourth quarter, for example, in non-garbage time, even during the last third of the season, was still like 8th or something. So, I mean, he was still playing quarterback during that stretch. So like here, the other thing, like the first 13 weeks of the season, his EPA numbers on non-play action passes and also removing quick game was like first in the league, or like his EPA was third, then his success rate was first. I mean, it was pure quarterbacking, and we'll get into this more, but there are components to the offense that Waldron didn't install that I think he wants to, and that we're going to see more of next year. That will, depend on receiver skill set makeup / tight end, but
yeah. And I think throughout the season we did see like a kind of a schematic dilemma between like how often do you want to leave the tackles exposed, like how often do you want to try and give the tackles help, and them actually coming out and saying, we don't want to. We want to try and limit the amount of one-on-ones they have out there because they're rookies and they're kind of learning on the job and they're playing against, like, say, a Nick Bosa. And it's stuff that in the second year of those tackles, you'd hope that you don't have to do as often. Like, you obviously scheme matchups, but you don't have to be as cautious. You need to see an improvement, and like, often tackles take that leap in the second year, right?
Right.
So just to emphasize I've just seen a good number to emphasize the kind of run heavier nature of the offense in the week 16 to 19. You've put here that their early down pass rate went from being the 5th highest in the league, but week 16 to 19 it was 20th in the league. So they started trying to run the ball more and trying to establish the run, if you like, because they needed it.
They had every reason to. One, like we talked about it in this season, like the run blocking was not good and they needed to get reps in. Like, so like they went from, because their gun running was pure like constraint oriented runs, right? Like the early and middle parts of the season, it was more like in gun, we're going to be a pass team, and then we're going to have these complementary runs to take advantage of bad fronts that we can check into. And then as the season went on, like their knee, like, okay, we actually can't run the ball, so we need to install like a base gun run. And that's also what Walker was used to at MSU, right? So like they install like just straight up inside zone, like going back to the basics. And then also injuries, and then the protection was so poor. Like they had every reason to commit to the run. And sure enough, they got better at it marginally. They had some really good games though, right? And Walker needed it. Like Walker needed those reps, not just for this year, but like for his rookie contract's sake, for the duration of his rookie contract. So
yeah, and I think the turnover worthy play thing is interesting. Like over the final 8 games of the season, through 7 interceptions, which is 5th most in the NFL, and Pro Football Focus had him throwing a league worst 17 turnover worthy throws, suggesting that number could have been higher. Now, in the top 10 of quarterbacks passing, 80.6% of their turnover worthy plays result in actual turnovers. But in Geno Smith's case, only 48% of his turnover worthy plays actually resulted in interception, suggesting again that he got lucky. How do you feel about that as a metric? Because I think throughout the season we saw turnover worthy plays from Geno, but I felt most of them were maybe a bit too close than you'd like, but most of them were him trying to. He wasn't trying to. You never try and throw a pick, but it wasn't necessarily a bad decision. It was actually a good decision to try and get out of pressure. Throw the ball away, get rid of a dead play. I and then tight window throws. I felt were really good tight window throws. I felt he had the arm to make that happen. He'd read the play right. It was a good decision. There was like one or two from poor pressing, but I probably, in my opinion, with turnover worthy plays, would disagree with some of the ones that have been charted as turnover worthy. I also think Gino has a style and a history that it could lead to some unavoidable like biases in grading that, say, compared to like a quarterback who you've seen for years make the right decisions. Like I felt his decision making, again, when we talk about process, I feel in this area too it was good. But Griff, that is still noteworthy, the 48. And like, how do you feel about it as a metric overall?
I mean, it is inherently subjective, but you'd hope that the people that are measuring that are trying to be consistent in how they're applying their subjectivity, right, to each and every quarterback. But so, I mean, like the like taking it at face value, it's the percentage of turnover worthy throws does increase significantly the last 5-6 weeks of the season. But then like he's like dead average the first 13 weeks. So to me, it's like
Further proof of what you've been talking about, right?
Right. Like, I feel like like you're going to get into that world with Gino when the picture around him breaks down that much. But if the picture breaks down around him that much, you're not going to have a good offense anyway. So yeah, like limit how bad it is, sure. But to me, it's like those turnover worthy throws, very few of them occurred in the pocket. And he tries to get everything he can out of the pocket before he bails. Like the sack rate increased. Now on early downs, sack rate was like top 5 in the league for the first 13 weeks of the season. And then even on early downs, that last stretch, he's still middle of the pack. So like his quarterback behavior changes on third down, because that's when he won't abort. Like he won't on third downs, he won't abort. He's like, okay, well, our last chance, I'm going to try to make something happen if something isn't there. But very rarely were his sacks him turning down something downfield. It was the alternative is, okay, maybe throw it away or maybe take off differently if you're trying to extend with your legs, right? But it's not like he's leaving offense on the table. It's more like how do you mitigate and manage how negative this play is about to be,
And again, that's when we talk about Gino's process remaining intact.
Right.
This is exactly the sort of stuff we mean. Like,
right. I mean, yeah, it's I've said it like 3 times, but I really feel like that first 49ers game is just kind of like the proof of this, because that occurred right after the Broncos game and occurred right before, was it the Falcons game, where he was really good in both of those games and Gino didn't change. The rest was just an environment that he can access his skills in. And the rest followed. So, but yeah, did he get lucky? I'm sure he did, but I feel like a lot of those throws are either they're not turnover worthy throws. A lot of them, they're definitely pass breakup worthy throws. Like,
yeah, we were saying
like,
at the time of them, like in a vacuum, like in a one play sample, we were saying like it's a risk you can take because you've anticipated it at the right time. You've thrown it hard enough. You've done it when the defender's back turn. Like, if it was picked, you'd almost be like, well, that's almost unfortunate.
an insane play by the defender. A lot
Right.
of them. Now, and that Gino's he's a gunslinger. He's a gunslinger that isn't doing stupid stuff though. Like he knows what he's looking at. There are a couple of them where he kind of throws almost with too much trust in the receiver, or he's a tick late. But again, like most of these are coming out of the pocket, and if not out of the pocket, out of structure. So to me, it's allow the structure to be workable enough, because Gino can still overcome bad structure. You just can't overcome near inoperable structure. Some quarterbacks can. So I'm not saying like There aren't quarterbacks that exist. Like, that's why he's not the best quarterback in the league. You know, there's a handful of guys you're going to take over him, of course. And that's why, because they can do that. But you can still, again, it's a team sport. They already have put on paper that they have the capacity. Geno himself has the capacity to be part of a top 5 offense, to be the quarterback of a top 5 offense. Everything else is around him. You can't say that about, you know, X amount of QBs, right? There's only a few. Like, you can be the 8th best quarterback in the league and be the quarterback for the 3rd best offense in the league, right? For example, to prove a point, right? Like, that's possible. Like Geno Smith is better than Jared Goff, and Jared Goff was on the 2nd best offense in football, if not the 1st best offense. First. So, like, that's right there. You would have taken 14 quarterbacks over Jared Goff that year in all likelihood. So
it has been pointed out by Nuke USC. That is not a very Pete Carroll username. But it's a good point. Geno did have 9 fumbles, including that playoff game. And the playoff game, as I mentioned, that was a kind of a crucial moment. I was in Munich when he bizarrely fumbled on a fairly similar play to the playoff game, where it's like confusion over kind of a run play in the red zone. Big moments where you don't want to cough the football up. I think the fumble thing is the big thing I'd ding at him for and what needs to be better. But there's some of this stuff, and I think the fumble thing is one thing. Fumbles are kind of random. There's stuff you can do to protect yourself against them. I don't think Geno has necessarily a mechanical issue. He doesn't have tiny hands. Like, it's not that. But because it's a 1-season sample size, you know, who's to say next year he doesn't fumble the ball a single time? Like, we just don't know. Like, until it wasn't a problem at West Virginia. So, I don't know.
I mean, just how about you just don't call stick draw? We don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, don't call stick draw. There we go. Although, you know, you could, because Geno is quite.
No, I love that play. Actually, it's great
play.
for them. I
just don't fumble the ball.
Yeah,
but yeah, you are correct. Nuke USC. So sort of the last thing on Geno is you know, sack percentage. You mentioned that in weeks 1 to 13, it was 15th in sack percentage. Weeks 14 to 18, he was 7th. Which sacks are largely a quarterback stat, but I do think this is kind of I again should have gone into it a bit more, but I think that's more a case of longer 3rd downs and trying to make stuff happen in those instances, as we've kind of spoke about. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Now, the other thing, average throw depth. Weeks 1 to 13, the average throw depth was 23rd, so not chucking the ball down the field. Weeks 14 to 18, Geno was 13th in average throw depth, so that went up, which is interesting. And again, how much of that is trying to make stuff happen in longer situations is an interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
I think also DK Metcalf, you sort of have to try and find ways to get him the football, and vertically is the option there. Yeah, that's an interesting one. And what that actual true number is, I'm not so sure, because as I've just said, like, the rates of coverage they faced didn't really change, and Geno's like performances against it didn't really change much either. So
yeah. Also, I wonder how much that middle of the field close figure is a function of 3rd down versus early down.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to look at. Yeah.
Yeah, like well, what are the early down versus 3rd down splits versus cover 3 and cover 1? It would be something to be interested in looking at.
Well, I remember,
and then also with a 4-man rush versus a 5-man rush, 6-man rush. You know.
Yeah.
Because that could just be like a function of like blitz numbers, you know.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Which can be a quarterback thing, can also be a team thing.
Yeah, yeah. So finally, accuracy-wise, Sports Info Solutions have a catchable percentage and an on-target percentage. Again, there's an element of subjectiveness to that. Weeks 1 to 13, they had Geno's 2nd and catchable percentage out of 38 eligible quarterbacks. I did a minimum of 100 throws and first in on target percentage. Yet in weeks 14 to 18, Gino was 20th in SIS's catchable percentage out of 27 eligible quarterbacks, minimum of 75 throws, and just 23rd in on target percentage. Now, did you see his accuracy noticeably dip?
When he was throwing on platform, really no. The Panthers game maybe, but like even that Rams game, the second Rams game, when he was on platform, he was doing what he always did. There weren't a lot of opportunities there, but like that Jets game, with some of the ball placement he made was insane, like insane stuff. The Chiefs game, he had some good throws. So I mean, like I just didn't see like him. I didn't see what made Gino like fall apart. It was just he can't manage some situations, you know. Yeah. So it's a good sign that like the arm was still there during that stretch when it was when there was room to make a good play, you know.
Yeah, I felt, I don't know, I need to go back and watch, but I felt a big thing that happened. Like, you remember that Jets game where they go 3 for 11 on third down. Obviously, the Jets kicked Seattle's butt up front in the run and the pass game. But I felt that game was a case of like receivers just not getting it done, like guys not making catches that they should, and also guys like not completing their routes. Like Dallas ran a weird route. I feel, even that's obviously a quarterback metric and catchable percentage on target percentage. Maybe if guys are running the wrong routes, perhaps not. But like, I also feel, as we spoke about receiver injuries, receiver regression, that that's a factor as well, which shouldn't be underplayed. And yeah, that's got to be off platform stuff, more trying to make things happen.
Yeah.
Like
the whole thing with Gino is you want him having to create late in the snap, because that means he's probably in more control. If he's creating early, he probably that's where he gets into the realm of something bad can happen.
Right. Think about all of his impressive improvisation plays early in the season. He's had a pocket, for whatever reason the play's not there, but then he's like moving up and knows where he's going. Yeah.
Like run and pass, right? Like it's I mean he's when the situation is manageable, he's a very good improviser and he doesn't do too much. Like that second 49ers game though, he found like early pressure frequently. And so then like, yeah, okay, you don't fault him for that, but then you can fault him for the decision he makes thereafter. It's like, why are you still playing with the same process? Like you can make every throw. Like it's not a bad decision and that you're reading the defense wrong. It's a bad decision and that you can't think you can get that throw off right there. So how do you manage that situation? Now, can he get innately better at that? Maybe, but I would just more like to preempt the circumstances where he might go into that line of play, that's where, I mean, really the rookies just going from year 1 to year 2 might be enough to do it, but that's where we'll talk about it. That's where you can improve, one or both center right guard spots,
Yeah. So conceptually, Griff, this was a pretty different offense to what we saw with Russell Wilson, which is to be, they're completely different players, so it makes sense. And you've highlighted drop back type as a way of illustrating that.
I think, yeah, the biggest thing that stands out now is that they have a more beefed up drop back game. It's kind of like their meat and potatoes. So their quick game usage got like cut down by like a third, and then they replaced that with more 5-step drop concepts. So from gun, the quarterback's taking only 3 steps, but a gun 3 drop is a 5-step drop because that's analogous to taking 5 drops from the under center. And then, like, if quick game is 3-step, historically, that's 3 steps from under center, but from gun, it's like a 1-step drop kind of. But yeah, so they had more deeper drop meat and potato of their offense. And like the general nature of it was kind of it started off anyway, similar to the McVay Rams, where, they spend roughly 40% of their total snaps in gun, and they're passing the ball at an extremely high rate in shotgun. And then when they go into under center, it's all it's either outside zone or outside or wide zone action, play action pass, right? Pocket or boot. And that's kind of like the general beats that Waldron had. Like, that was the main structure, but they were a little bit different in that they, there were two main differences. They were more of a normal split team. They didn't use tight splits as much. And that followed from not having instead of having 3 locket types, they really only had 1 locket type. And they thought maybe they had it in Eskridge, but they clearly didn't. And then, because he got hurt, and then Goodwin being a veteran, you're not leaning all the way into that. So they had to more accommodate DK as a result of that, lean more into making him work formationally with the offense. So the splits was a big thing. And then that matters because then from that follows the menu of plays. Still Waldron, still McVay-ish, but definitely different. But then the other main difference aside from splits was that the use of pistol. So that was where, pistol, when the quarterback's in shotgun, but then the running back's behind him. Because of that, you're liable to run wide zone from that formation or backfield set. So if you do that, the defenses know that, then you're able to run essentially, outside zone play action or under center play action concepts from shotgun. But then from there, and we talked about this over the course of the season, if you catch the defense in a personnel package and a call that seems suited for defending outside zone and outside zone play action or wide zone play action passes, then that means, because by virtue of being a shotgun, you can either check into a play or just call a different play that is more like your true drop back shotgun pass. So the way I characterize Waldron for the whole course of the season was the cool stuff he did weren't necessarily plays, cool play design, so much as it was manipulating personnel packages, manipulating the defense, and then having the balance to run almost anything what you do run whenever you want. So becoming tendency proof and being incredibly balanced, picking up almost free yards just by alignment, really, when the play design isn't anything novel.
Do you think he ran out of ideas like that? And do you think that's why the offense started to struggle?
I think so. The main problem with their 11 personnel was that, yeah, you've got 2 guys that are target sponges and really good, but they're very specific skill sets, because Lockett didn't want to take hits anymore. So you couldn't run as much over the middle stuff with him. And then DK should pretty much only be a perimeter guy, right? He got better at some things, but you can't, he's not Robert Woods. He's not Cooper Kupp. He's not Brandon Cooks. He's not even Sammy Watkins in terms of style, right? So, and I mentioned all those guys are Rams receivers, obviously. So the fact that they didn't have the third guy in their 11 personnel package that could kind of marry DK and Tyler a little bit meant that Waldron was kind of, he's fantastic again that he had DK and Tyler, but he couldn't quite conceptually do the things that he wanted, under center tight split. You'd like to have someone be interchangeable with Lockett so that anyone could be running the inbreaker, anyone then could be running the outbreaker. You can run the same play but reverse it, and the formation could be identical, and the defense doesn't know who's coming from where. So that whole that multiplying factor you have of the defense not knowing, you might know what the play is, but you don't know who's running what. He didn't have that factor element to his defense. That was because he didn't really have the Lockett mirror. So then that meant, okay, to offset, he kind of recreated that through his 12 personnel usage. And that was the only way he could reduce the formation down. That was also like he ran like that play action wide shallow, right? He ran that like 7-8 times this year. That effectively, like when Gino hit those quick hitting play action crossers to Fant or Disley, I think one time to Colby, that effectively replaced their strike play, their drift play, the play action dig to the receiver.
Pops
And that
linebacker or outside a linebacker, yeah.
right. And it's still a good play, but like that goes for 8 to 10 yards, whereas the X, the hitting it to the X or the Z in a true speed cut dig can be a minimum of 12. And if you catch that thing in stride, you might be gone. Like the amount of times Cooper Kupp or Robert Woods caught that ball and got another 10 yards of yak was, you're gashing the defense up the middle like that. So he couldn't really do that the way he wanted to. And I thought he did a great job of using 12 personnel, especially on the boot game and 13 personnel. But I feel like he wants another Lockett, which you can get this draft, or close enough to where like the usage is similar.
Similar skill set, yeah.
Right. I mean, and maybe not even the way that Lockett's been historically used, but you can imagine peak Lockett in the Rams offense just doing pure Kupp Wood stuff, right? Like he could have done that. Like you wouldn't see as many big posts, as many big overs, but a lot, well, maybe the overs, but more digs, more outs, stuff like that. But like Lockett has been more of a big game hunter the way they've used him. But you can imagine Lockett could have been used that way. And my hunch is that if they had peak Brandon Cooks or peak Robert Woods, they would have used Lockett more in that direction because it pulls Lockett into the formation more. It pulls him into those plays more because you can get into that interchangeability. So it's kind of like they don't just need that third target for that player's individual production, but there's like a systemic effect of how they would structure their offense entirely. And Waldron couldn't really get into that. So he got way more vertical, in part because not because he had to, because he got to, because Gino can actually go yard, and you have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett can go yards. So,
yeah, and again, that's the average throw depth increasing as the year progressed.
Mm-hmm.
And the reliance on 12 personnel. Then when Will Dissly gets hurt, misses 16, 17, 18, misses two games. Anyway, when he gets hurt, that's a problem because as much as you love your 12 personnel looks, Colby Parkinson ain't as good a blocker as Will Dissly, and Fant is fine, but you sort of lose the versatility that you had in the package.
Right.
So,
go ahead.
No, continue.
I was just gonna say, I hope they don't abandon pistol. I hope it remains a feature, and they did kind of abandon it over the course of the season. Like it was anywhere between 10 and 25% of their snaps on early downs. The first, when it died was probably like a week 11 or 12. But then it would come back for a couple of games, but then they pretty much ditched it the last 4 weeks of the season. I think that was just, injuries breaking the camel's back. Like they kind of had to do other things. So
I asked Dino about that in Germany.
Yeah.
He literally said it lets us hide some of our run plays and pass plays.
Yeah.
Gives us different different options.
Which is it. Yeah, it's a confluence of
and then he mentioned how rather than gun where the back's offset, pistol it's in the dot, so that it hides that as well.
Yep.
But yeah, I guess they just ran out of bullets, and they do need that guy who can go over the middle, like and so in that sense, was Fant slightly disappointing because obviously he tested and plays incredibly athletically, but when they dialed stuff up for him, it just didn't hit for a variety of reasons.
He's got all the traits, he just doesn't have the skill set. Like
he's not a player.
I think he is a very good tight end 2 to have, and the scheme needs a second tight end that is electric. But really, like ideally, like they could just swap out Disley for an elite Y tight end and that would be sick. Like, and they could recommit to the whole, like, the 11 personnel usage would remain the same. The 12 personnel usage would remain the same, but the 12 personnel would just be better and you could do more things in it. And spend the same amount of time in it, and just let Noah Fant be your Jonnu Smith, your Gerald Everett guy, where it's yards after the catch. You can do occasional things with him downfield, but like getting a wide tight end there who can just win routes at the intermediate, the second level, like in the drop back game and under center, like you can just like he effectively be your de facto slot receiver. They could go that direction if they want. Like, this is their draft where they can go get their third guy that is capable of handling 100 targets efficiently. They could get that guy at the tight end position. That would mean Waldron would be doing things he hasn't really done yet before. Like, he already has never done this exactly identically before, the way he used 12 personnel. I mean, maybe he was part of one of those Patriots teams that did, right? Like going way back when he was with the Patriots and he was just an assistant, like a quality control assistant, like not even like working with the position group. So, I mean, and like, it's still fairly universal football stuff. It's not like he's never seen it before. But like, worked with it this much. Like, if they want to go get whoever you like, Mayer, Musgrave, Kincaid, even, to go be the guy that as a rookie gets you 80 targets, and then year 2, year 3 is looking at 100 plus targets, and to do that out of the tight end position, they can. And that could be pretty exciting. Like, Geno loves throwing to tight ends. Like, some of his best plays, even going back to the Jets, were to like no-name tight ends, like guys you've never heard of, but he just loves the position. He likes throwing. That's what's so funny. He loves going over the middle. Like, and arguably, and they still went over the middle more this year than they ever have, except with the exception of Jimmy Graham, but because Jimmy's Jimmy, right?
No, but that's a big thing to talk about, the fact that
Right.
targets inside the numbers were so much higher. Like, it became a meme that Russ wouldn't throw like a dig route or wouldn't throw inside the numbers, but like Gino really did prove that a point that, like, yeah, you can, that is a possible thing when you're playing quarterback in Seahawks blue. Like,
yeah.
So I think that's a pretty comprehensive roundup. The fact that, there were concepts which, actual digs on the backside of stuff, and like levels in that way. Oh yeah, you've put about that. Yeah, you've put that in the notes. Very good.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Say something.
Well, another feature of the offense that is new is that, like, even when they do run quick game, like, they run less of it, right? But when they do run quick game, they've attached like the ability to access the second level with it, which is always big. Like, when they go 3x2 empty, 3 receivers on one side, 2 receivers on the back side, the front side will be like stick or spacing, something like that. But then the back side will be like, they'll attach dig routes, like a high-low, like the number 2 receiver will run a hitch, the number 1 receiver will run a dig route, or they'll run like a cross followed by like a dig route, or like a cross followed by like a little 5-yard in, or they'll run like a double dig, or kind of almost like a dagger almost. And like, he's hitting those, and even if he isn't hitting it, he's progressing to it, and the receiver wasn't open, like on some of those. And that's another thing to identify and be like, there's so much more meat on the bone here, that if they do get that third guy and each side of the formation has a dude, like, Geno will absolutely take full advantage of it. It's just sometimes it wasn't there. Like, as good as Marquise Goodwin was, like, everyone really appreciated Goodwin this year when he played, he's still not that guy. Like, even at his best, he's not that guy. Like, there's occasional like backside digs, 3x2 empty. They're running like stick and then dig on the backside, and Geno's getting to the backside of it, and it's like to the field, and that dig isn't there, but Geno wants to throw it. He wants to throw it, but it's not there. So like, you insert in someone that knows what they're doing in Marquise Goodwin's spot, Brandon Cooks, and like, who knows, man? Who knows?
Even Cade Johnson, when he got some action, like, Geno's and it's do or die time. Geno's trying to find him in these kind of windows. And obviously Cade doesn't know what he's doing out there, really. But like, you see the potential of, if someone did know what they're doing. like a tertiary,
I mean,
a true tertiary target.
Yeah, if Tariq Young wants to turn into Deebo Samuel, you can go run all that stuff with him.
Could happen.
Crazier things have happened.
There you go. So
Yeah.
come combine, I'll be looking at guys who are 5'10", 190 pounds, and ran like a 6'7", 6'6" 3-cone. 6'5" maybe. Although the 3-cone seems to have died in recent years. Like people just don't do it.
What was because they know that can. If you don't run a 3-cone, I'll just assume you wouldn't have ran a good one.
So true. And John Schneider, Griff, has a new radio show on Thursdays on Seattle Sports, Wyman and Bob. And he said how when he was with the Packers, he had got them a 7th round pick via trade of someone, and he asked Ted Thompson if he could pick that 7th rounder, and Ted Thompson was like, yes. And then he said to Ted Thompson that he wanted to draft Julian Edelman, and Thompson said, nah, I was just kidding with you, man. We're not going to let you pick a guy. And so they took Brad Jones. But Doug Baldwin is like a really similar athletic profile to Julian Edelman.
Yeah.
So basically, we do need to find that kind of player.
Right. And John is always looking for his next undervalued slot receiver.
Right. Which was John Sewer, but he was 178 pounds and he hurt his hamstring in the first 40-yard dash. And he unfortunately got unlucky with injuries during his NFL career.
And I think we know that John secretly, he'd never say it, but he's secretly hoping Cade is that too. And like he's name dropped him a couple of times too. Like he's trying to manifest without overhyping him.
He's hyped up Tariq Young as well, whereas he's a bit bigger. But the other thing which came out of that interview, Griff, is Schneider said, we've had good talks so far on the Geno Smith contract negotiations. He said, we're in it, just trying to figure out what's best. We will do what's right. He kind of added that we will do what's right in at the end, and he was rambling. So, I mean, to me, again, it's another sign that Geno will be a Seahawks quarterback, whatever, will just, it's sort of like, just trying to figure out what's best. To me, that's, Geno's seeing what he's worth elsewhere. They'll get the numbers right, so he's respectful, and they'll make it happen in whatever way. There's ways of structuring things, where do you put the guarantees? How do you make this person happy, etc., etc. But par for the course so far. It sounds like it'll get done.
Yeah. Yep. I don't think, on that note, then the natural question is, would they even touch quarterback in the first round? I can't see that.
Well, we have quarterbacks to talk about. Next week we'll do Jalen Carter, Will Anderson chatter, and we could do quarterbacks next week. Do you want to do that, or do you want to do the special teams review?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, special teams.
Yeah.
Wait, did Van Dyke declare?
Van Dyke.
Tyler Van Dyke. Is he going back? I don't even know.
I don't think he declared.
Okay. Because he was the only guy that I could imagine that they would be into that would make it to the second or third round where they'd start to think about taking a quarterback after having paid Geno.
I thought he was really young. I thought he was next year.
Oh, is he? Okay. Then I don't even know.
No, I could be wrong.
Because
I meant to be wrong.
In a perfect world, Richardson...
No, he could have declared, but he's returning.
Yeah. In a perfect world, Richardson should go in the third round. And he'd be the guy that would be really funded. You'd pay Geno and take Richardson in the third round, but the hype machine, he's going to go in the top half of the first at this rate.
Well, we did at one point think the same would happen with Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder, and we certainly didn't expect that guy, Kenny Pickett, to be the first one off the board. So
Right. Yeah. So
there is some hope that quarterbacks will fall. And when it's Hendon Hooker, you'll like it.
The thing is that he'll be fucking 30 years old by the time he actually plays a
that's
meaningful
fine,
snap.
and that's okay because
So,
Gino is 31. So,
but with that that in mind though, like that whole idea of like, hey, get a developmental guy, like they'll just view Locke as that. Which sure, if he's a backup, keep him in
Locke is
house for a while.
traitsy.
Yeah.
But there is the question of if he will resign in Seattle, especially with Dave Canales getting hired
Right.
to Tampa Bay, and also Locke saying Greg Bell, who's obviously connected with Locke, he said that Locke told him he wants to play next year, so that sounds less likely that he'll return.
Imagine if he said otherwise.
No, I don't want to play. Nah.
Yeah.
Nah, I
Yeah.
like watching Gino and picking up a nice backup quarterback check. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. I can't imagine. So, like, if you're just in Drew Lock's shoes, given your career trajectory, Seattle is a really squishy, comfy situation because they love you. They're investing in you, you know, behind the scenes and stuff.
right.
You'll still get like a chunk of change being a backup, nice $1 million contract.
Yeah, like, do
You
you
know,
really go to Tampa Bay and
Yeah.
like thrown to the wolves?
right.
I mean, you do have Mike Evans and
Also,
Godwin, and
are you prepared for what I'm about to say?
don't trade for anyone.
I heard from a little birdie that
Oh, little birdie.
all the receivers are on the table in terms of moving them in Tampa Bay. That doesn't mean they want to move all of them, but they want to move one of them, and they're willing
Right.
to move any of them.
Okay, that's cool.
Mike Evans not the perfect Gino receiver, and that reinforces the strength and can mop up some of the weakness.
I don't see how
Catch radius, baby.
But that's not going to be the. That's not the Robert Woods type that you hope.
I know. It's so. I mean, can you imagine an offense with DK and Evans?
Evan. They are very similar in usage, right?
Yeah. You're like the Chargers where they had Vincent Jackson and Malcolm Smith, where they just Phillip Rivers was just doing nothing but Norv Turner, like 7-step go balls
timing
all game long. Yeah.
That was awesome. And then
and hey, who's probably Gino's? Who does he model his game after the most? Probably, in all likelihood, probably fucking Phillip Rivers.
Oh man, when you hear Gino speak about Rivers, it's awesome.
Yeah,
Rivers was that guy.
Yeah. Anyway, so Brandon Cooks for third, or they cap cut Robert Woods. You sign him for $4.5 million.
We've been talking long enough, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Enough. Okay, we'll be back. We'll actually have draft stuff now. We've done the recap. Check out the draft stuff we've done. We looked at Senior Bowl guys. Already the cool dudes are now talking about our Senior Bowl guys. The Seattle Overloads prospects. And yeah, now we can look ahead. Jalen Carter, Will Anderson, talk about that. Griff has dived very deep into them way earlier than me. We'll talk about quarterbacks. We'll talk about receivers. We'll talk about the combine. We'll talk about all of that good stuff. And free agency happens as well. There will be a Gino re-signing, we think, in Seattle. And if not, then it's complete carnage. So you got that to look forward to.
Right.
Thank you everyone for tuning in live. Like the video. Follow Griff on Twitter at CMikeSpinMove. Follow me at Matty F. Brown. Follow the podcast at Seattle Overload. Hopefully I won't have a cold next time we record and my usual voice will be restored. If you're listening, 5-star review, download the podcast. Do that anyway if you're watching now. We appreciate you. It's 3 a.m. Have a good night.